Kneel down and apologize." The words sliced through the elegance of the wedding venue like a cold blade. Polished wooden panels, the gentle scent of jasmine in the air, candlelight glinting off crystal glassware. Suddenly it all felt suffocating, like a mask being ripped away. In a southern mansion where there should have only been love and laughter, a quiet test of dignity was unfolding. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a threshold, a place where prejudice could be stripped bare or quietly fed by silence. Naomi Carter, 35, walked slowly down the gravel path leading to the Kingsley estate. To many, it was a symbol of wealth and grandeur, but to her it was the shape of invisible shackles. Her footsteps pressed not only into stone, but into 15 years of bending of calloused hands, of eyes, trained to stay lowered because of her skin color. But today, something had changed. If you've ever thought small actions can't lead to something greater, stay. Because you're about to witness what happens when one person refuses to bow and the world is forced to choose where it stands. The morning sun bathed Charleston in gold, and the magnolia scent lingered softly. But for Naomi, that sweetness always carried the bitterness of duty. At 35, she no longer believed that hard work alone could change her life. She had tried. She had endured. She had given her all. 15 years as the housekeeper of the Kingsley estate, a family famed for their southern real estate empire. Naomi wasn't a dreamer. She worked relentlessly to survive paying bills, sending money to her younger brother studying engineering in Atlanta. But deep down, she knew her effort was only ever seen as obligation, never a real contribution. That morning, she tied her white apron and pulled a tray of hot cornbread from the oven. The smell of melting butter mixed with the rhythmic hum of the coffee machine, a familiar melody in a kitchen preparing for the wedding of this century. 200 guests, live jazz under the stars, wine flowing until dawn. She glanced at the task board, fold linens, polish crystal, confirm florals, coordinate with the caterers. Each line no longer felt like instruction, but a checkpoint in a journey of strength that no one ever acknowledged. Naomi never complained. She was precise, disciplined. But something in Eleanor Kingsley's eyes that day, mother of the bride, felt different. No longer just watchful. It was predatory, as if she were waiting for the tiniest slip to strike. And that slip was coming. Naomi walked down the hallway, arms full of perfectly pressed table linens. Through the tall glass window to her right, she saw workers setting up white tents in the garden. The sound of a trumpet player floated in the air, a southern dream being stitched together with champagne lace and imported roses. But to Naomi, it wasn't music. It was the distant thrum of a machine powered by resignation. "Naomi." The voice snapped like a blade from behind. Eleanor Kingsley stood there, rigid posture, silver hair pulled into a flawless bun, icy blue eyes sharpened with disapproval. "Those linens were supposed to be out an hour ago. Are you trying to ruin my daughter's wedding?" Naomi gripped the edges of the fabric a little tighter. Her voice remained steady. "They're folded, ma'am. I'm bringing them now." Eleanor didn't reply. She simply stared, searching not for a flaw, but for a reason, then turned sharply, her heels clicking like gunfire down the hall, echoing in Naomi's chest. Naomi placed the linens carefully on the table, each crease aligned like a quiet offering of dignity. From across the room, Clara, a 19-year-old maid, whispered nervously, "Be careful, Miss Naomi. She's in a mood today. I heard Miss Isabel told her to keep an eye on you." Naomi gave a faint smile but didn't respond. Inside, something stirred. The linens were folded, but the insult, the wound, continued unfolding silently within. And just minutes later, A single breeze would bring the entire scene crashing down. The bridal suite glowed under the crystal chandelier. Everything was pristine, from the white lace gown to the silverware laid out like artifacts. Naomi entered carrying the final tablecloth and ivory damask custom-made for the wedding signing table. She unfolded it with ease, hands trained by years of habit. But a soft breeze slipped in through a cracked window. The corner of the cloth lifted light as breath, then fluttered to the floor. It took mere seconds. Naomi bent down gently, brushing away imagined dust. And then Eleanor's voice sliced through the silence, no longer irritated now, issuing judgment. "What did you just do, Naomi? This is my daughter's wedding." "You think you can be careless here." Isabel Kingsley, the bride, spun around, voice cold as the crystal in her hair. "You embarrassed me. If you had any decency, you'd apologize. Properly." Naomi straightened cloth still in her hands, her voice calm but firm. "I'm sorry, Miss Isabel. I'll fix it now." Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes glinting like broken glass. "That's it. No. Today you will kneel and apologize in front of everyone." The room froze. The chandelier shimmered above Isabel's hair. Bridesmaids stopped. Some turned away. Some held their breath. Naomi clutched the cloth a little tighter. And then, from the depths of memory, her late mother's voice rose like a hymn. "Before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave." She knew the choice before her, and this time, she would not bow. The ivory damask cloth still hung in Naomi's hands, but it was no longer just fabric. It had become a line drawn in sand, a choice, a stand. She remained upright, her expression calm yet unshakable, as if every scorching southern summer she had ever endured had forged her spine in fire. Eleanor took another step forward. The expensive perfume clinging to her silk collar became a threat in the air. "Naomi, you will kneel. That's the least you can do after such a mistake." Isabel's voice sliced and sharp and high-pitched. "If you don't kneel, I swear I'll make sure you never work in Charleston again." The air thickened. The bridesmaids' dresses swayed slightly as if bracing for impact. One girl whispered, "Please, don't make her do this." But Naomi didn't move. The cloth now draped silently at her side, a banner without words. Her voice rose not loud but resolute, every syllable shaped by clarity. "I've apologized. I will fix the mistake. But I don't need to kneel to prove I mean it." The words dropped like stone into still water. Eleanor let out a bitter, stinging laugh. "Oh, so now you think you're above us. This is a Kingsley wedding. You show respect our way." Naomi closed her eyes just briefly. When she opened them, they were steady, steeled by every year she had been ignored, overlooked, undervalued. "I'm a housekeeper," she said, voice unwavering. "But I'm not a slave. I will not kneel. Not for this. Not for who I am." One bridesmaid gasped. Another touched her chest as if hearing a bell toll from within. The room was no longer a bridal suite. It was a stage for quiet rebellion, a reckoning cloaked in lace and candlelight. And Naomi, once only seen when needed, now stood as the center of every gaze. No one spoke. The silence was thick and breathless, the kind that only comes before something irreversible. The chandelier shimmered above like a witness to something sacred and brutal. Eleanor Kingsley's voice cracked the silence. Each word hammered like nails. "You're fired. Get out of my house. Ungrateful." She caught herself before the final slur, but the air was already poisoned. Isabel turned her face away, not out of shame, but to hide the embarrassment that her picture-perfect wedding had just unraveled. Naomi didn't argue. She lowered her gaze to the cloth in her hands and quietly folded it one last time, each movement precise, ritualistic, like she was laying to rest something that had once mattered not the fabric, but the dignity she had preserved through years of being unseen. She placed it gently on the table, smoothed the edges, then turned, her back straight, her shoulders still, her hands trembling but her stride steady. As she crossed the threshold of the room, a voice called out soft but unmistakable, "Miss Naomi, you're not alone." It was Eli, the young server she had once quietly helped when he'd dropped a tray on his first day. His eyes now burned with something new, not fear, but conviction. Naomi paused. Behind her, Eleanor's heels clicked like gunshots. "Call security, get her out." But Naomi didn't flinch. She had already released what they could take from her. What remained was hers. In the kitchen, the smell of warm cornbread still floated in the air. It should have smelled like duty, but today, it smelled like memory, like freedom passed down in secret songs, like something ancient awakening. Naomi had lost her job. She had lost her safety, but she had kept her name, her voice, her fire. And deep in the shadows, she wasn't the only one who had begun to burn. Naomi had barely reached the kitchen door when it burst open. Eli rushed in, breathless eyes burning. "Miss Naomi, come quick. They're waiting for you." Before she could respond, she stepped into a room that had fallen completely silent. 12 people. Line cooks, prep cooks, dishwashers, servers, different ages, different shades of skin, all standing in a circle, not speaking, but watching her with something powerful in their eyes, unity. At the center stood Rosa, the head cook, a woman who had spent 3 generations working behind stoves, living beneath ceilings that never rose with her. Her fists clutched her apron, voice deep and rooted, Eli told us. "They made you kneel for a cloth. But this ain't just about today." From the back, someone muttered, "It's every time they called us you people instead of by name." Another added, "Every tray we carried like we weren't human. Every look. Every whisper." Naomi stepped back, shaking her head gently. "You don't have to risk your jobs for me." Rosa stepped closer, locking eyes with her no. "You didn't ask us to stand, but you did. And now we can't sit anymore." Eli nodded beside her. "No more cornbread. No more folding napkins. If they want a wedding, they can serve themselves." A low murmur swept through the kitchen like dry grass catching fire. Not chaos. Purpose. Rosa turned to the others. "This isn't just about a cloth. It's about every woman who's ever been told to kneel while no one looked." And one by one, they untied aprons, peeled off gloves, and set down trays not in anger, but in clarity. They walked out into the sunlight not as servers, but as witnesses. The wedding was still happening, but no one yet knew that those who had always been invisible had just rewritten the story. Outside the garden was a page from a bridal magazine, white silk draped over chairs, imported roses, in tall crystal vases, a jazz band playing under a glowing southern sky. But something was off. Guests began shifting in their seats. Murmurs grew louder. Champagne flutes sat empty. Plates were bare. "Where's the food? Why hasn't service started?" Confused glances turned into impatient frowns. And then, like a storm crossing silk skies, Eleanor Kingsley appeared, perfect posture, perfect dress, fury barely contained. "Rosa Eli." Where is everyone? Get back to work now. But no one moved. Rosa, standing in the open lawn beside Eli, replied without raising her voice, "We don't work for people who treat Naomi like dirt." The statement fell heavy like thunder. A ripple ran through the crowd. A woman in a red dress called out from the seating rows, "What did she even do? Spill wine." Before anyone could answer, a new voice rang out, clear, direct, and utterly unexpected. "Jonathan Hale." The groom stepped forward. His gray suit was slightly wrinkled tie, loosened from chaos, but his gaze was laser-focused on Eleanor. "She dropped a cloth," he said. "She apologized." "And you demanded she kneel." Gasps. He turned to face the guests. "They fired her. They humiliated her. Because she's black. Because they thought they could." Isabel, pale beneath her bridal makeup, stepped forward whispering, "Jonathan, this is our wedding." He looked at her, and for the first time he truly saw her. "No, this is a performance, and I won't play the groom in a family that builds its pride on someone else's pain." He turned and walked away, leaving Isabel frozen in lace, leaving Eleanor speechless beneath her hat, leaving 200 stunned guests with their mouths open and their hearts exposed. At the edge of the lawn, Naomi said nothing. She didn't need to, because the fire had already started. The next morning, Charleston wasn't talking about the dress, or the jazz band, or the champagne. They were talking about Naomi Carter. A shaky video recorded from a guest's phone had captured the moment she stood tall cloth in hand and declared, "I am not a slave. I will not kneel." It was first posted with a simple caption, "She didn't kneel." The wedding collapsed. Dignity won. Within hours, it was picked up by a popular Black lifestyle blogger with 2 million followers, then by an independent journalist, then by a national civil rights page. Hashtags erupted, "Never Kneel," "Stand With," Naomi stories poured in like rain on dry earth. From waitresses, warehouse workers, nurses, nannies, mothers. A woman wrote, "I was Naomi when I served my boss's dinner party and wasn't allowed to sit and eat." Another, "I used to bow my head to keep my job. Today I choose to lift it." And somewhere in a small apartment dimly lit by morning sun, Naomi sat in silence watching her phone buzz with notifications. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Then she read one message, short but steady, that made her chest tighten. "You didn't just stand for yourself. You stood for all of us." Then a knock at the door. It was Rosa holding a freshly folded ivory tablecloth and a warm pan of cornbread. Her eyes sparkled. "Someone wants to meet you. His name is Caleb Monroe, event organizer, former consultant to the mayor's office. He says, 'This city needs someone with your spine.'" Naomi didn't answer right away. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to think something different. She didn't need to go back to serving. She could start building. That evening, Naomi's small apartment glowed not with lamps, but with laughter, hope, and the quiet power of people who had once been invisible. Eli came in holding a manila folder bursting with resumes. "I'll handle recruiting, Miss Naomi. There are so many folks out there like us just waiting for a place that says their name out loud." Clara, the timid maid who once flinched under Eleanor's stare, raised her hand. "I'll run social media. The world needs to hear your story." Rosa said nothing at first. She simply placed an old, worn recipe notebook on the table. "I'll run the kitchen. No one in Charleston bakes cornbread like me." And as the room buzzed with soft voices clinking cups and the energy of something new being born, Naomi rose from her seat. She lifted her ceramic mug and looked around, not at staff but at partners. "I don't just want to stand. I want to build a place where no one ever has to bow just to belong." She paused, then said it aloud like a vow. "We'll call it Freedom Events." Applause rippled through the room, not loud but grounded, like an oath, a quiet, certain promise. Freedom wouldn't begin with speeches. It would begin with service done in dignity. Weeks later, the Kingsley estate sat cold and silent. Phone calls unanswered. Contracts withdrawn. The family's empire built on image quietly unraveling. In a bedroom still covered in tulle and lace, Isabel stared at the wedding dress that was never worn. She had sent Naomi a message. "I'm sorry. If you're willing to talk, I'm willing to listen." Naomi saw the message, but she hadn't opened it. Not yet. Forgiveness, maybe, but only on her terms, because now she wasn't someone who served others by shrinking. She was a woman who stood tall, building a legacy, keeping the fire alive for every woman still waiting to step out of the shadows.